Kim, we are back for another week. And I know we have a couple of different questions that we kind of want to combine into one kind of theme today. So
Okay.
what did you find? Who was posting?
Somebody had posted how to raise your vibration. Another person had posted how do I get names? How do I get dates? Another person had asked about why they were feeling anxious in a reading and what to do afterwards. So
Why don't we take the anxious one first? Because I think that'll lead into the rest of them.
all right.
That's all right.
Take it away.
Yeah, because the whole idea of, well, there's a few reasons I think we can feel different things emotionally during a reading. One, that spirit communicator could be recognizing a memory in their life that was that, right? And we get so wrapped up in that feeling that we don't recognize or aren't willing to go behind or around or through that feeling to see what the rest of the story is.
Right.
Why were they anxious at that memory? What is it that's being conveyed? And another reason could be whatever they're conveying in their memory as a spirit communicator, we don't like on some level, and we're not willing to go there. So our body starts shooting up all kinds of warning signals because it's something that we don't like, right? That happened in their life. And then all of a sudden, we think it's all anxious or whatever. And here we've hit one of our own little nerves that we're not willing to look at or whatever. What do you think about that?
Well, you know what I think is that, and this drives me crazy when I hear this sometimes, when people associate blending and merging with spirit with trance mediumship. And yes, that is true, but it's also true with mental mediumship.
Mm-hmm.
Both
altered states, right? Both are altered states.
Right. They're exactly. One's deeper and one is lighter form of trance, and so a lighter form of trance is mental mediumship, and we're still blending with spirit. Mm-hmm. So with that being said, again, just exactly what you had said, we are collecting things of spirit. They're giving us information about themselves. And sometimes, again, we think it's us when we're getting in a physicality, in a sense, when they're actually transmuting their information, their life, their physicalities onto us, because we have merged with him, not in deep trance like this, but like this.
Right. And we recognize that through our body. I mean, that's the source for the translation of that energy is our own bodies. So our own bodies react in whatever way that we are best able to react at that time, and then the translation comes in. Why are we reacting? Are we willing to actually translate the reaction into something beyond, oh, I'm anxious, or, oh, I'm having an anxiety attack?
Right.
Why is that happening in that moment? Are we willing to sit with it? And I think, and this what gets to the other ones, are we willing to sit with ourselves in real time, in real life situations when we feel something?
Mm-hmm.
It's like when we get irritated or upset or even really joyful, are we willing to sit with that, to recognize how our body's reacting in that moment? And that will help give us a clue for what's happening when we hit that same thing with a spirit communicator, because it's our bodies that do the translating.
Right. They're using everything. They're using our mind, senses, everything, our body, everything. So, but as you were talking earlier before, it's everybody is different in as far as how they learn the language of spirit. So it's not going to be the same for everybody. It's a very unique experience for each medium and how spirit communicates with you. So
yeah. So how do you get names? Well, how do you recognize names in real life? Are you one of those people that have to see name tags on somebody's lapel before you start remembering them? Are you somebody that recognizes faces with names? How do you do it regularly? How do you, are you somebody that never calls somebody by their name and you recognize them through other characteristics? Well, that's going to show through on your own way you translate the information. There's this idea of names and dates. It's great. In fact, this past weekend, and it stuck with me. This past weekend, I did a demonstration And a friend of mine said, I'm so proud of you for getting those names that you did. And I thought about it later. I'm like, why is that the pride point? Why wasn't it that that I recognized Spirit was pointing out the bracelets that the lady had on from her boyfriend that had passed in a car accident, and she was clutching that, as soon as I said the bracelet, she started clutching and crying. That's what was the emotion energy part in the reading, not that I happen to have the daughter's name. I mean, that was great, but
Right.
does that make sense? So what, to put emphasis on certain types of evidence is an us thing. I don't know that that's a necessity for the communication in the moment all the time. I think that's us saying, I like to have dates. I like to wow everybody with saying exactly how they passed or have a name,
Right.
Yeah, good for you, but I don't know that that's the questions we need to be asking. I think it's how do we recognize that essence totally in the moment, not can my system pull out a name from that essence.
Yeah, because I don't know if, I don't believe that spirit came through that veil, through us, for the sitter, just to give a date.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is, that's like, what do you call it? What do you call it? it's, it's the little extra. It's the little extra,
And it's a good, I mean, yeah, it feels nice when you get those things. I'm not going to deny that. It was pretty cool, but I don't know that that's the emphasis.
It's
I
not
don't know that those are the questions we need to be asking how to do for spirit.
right. Exactly. I think it's it's just like when you do the rank name serial number, and I kind of tossed it out years ago. And sometimes I will go by that just because I just will. Just it feels natural at that particular time, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes other information comes before that and blah blah blah. I don't worry about the relationship anymore. And what happens is if that relationship is supposed to come, it
You'll,
will come back around.
Mhm.
And sometimes at the end of the reading, I mean, if I say a few points of evidence, like, well, I see him in Yankee Stadium and he had butt crack and he spilled a beer on somebody lower. Oh, that was my uncle. That was so and so. I know who you have. I know who you have. I'm like, okay. And I'll go on with that person, without them telling me who the relationship is. And then later on, I'll say, well, who was that? They'll say that was Uncle Fred. Oh, okay.
No, I think that's perfect because I don't know that somebody goes to a family reunion and says, hello, I'm Uncle Frank. They say, hello, do you remember when I took you to the baseball game and we got a pinwheel and the ball flew over our heads? It's,
Right.
it's, how do we react to each other in real time and in real life? And then, I think to get better with those details is to maybe pay attention to our own details and maybe do some little people watching. I know that might sound creepy, but if you pay attention to the people around you and how they interact and their little details and, their mannerisms and how they, portray themselves or even talk about themselves, if we take that on, then that'll be what our body and our senses recognize first from that energy. And because really, if we're going for the same 5 pieces of evidence all the time or trying to get
Right.
that is totally us reaching into that and pulling that out. Which
Well,
might be good to start, but we need to get past that. We need to get past it.
there's an exercise that I used to do with my students, and it would be, this sounds a little stalkerish, creepy-ish, but not really. I would tell them, all right, so when you go out today and you go to the grocery store or you go wherever you're going and somebody catches your eye, let's say you go into the grocery store and you go to the meat department and you see the butcher, just observe him for a minute, go home and write a story about him.
Right.
I'm not trying to bring spirit through, but just write a story about it and make it detailed. Just make things up.
That's
And
fantastic. That's a great exercise.
you're going to notice when you do that, like, well, afterwards, they would come back with the stories. And it's like, you didn't say that he was 5'10" and had brown hair. You talked about, what he drove and his relationship with his wife and, his bills that he had to pay. And he brought home a big side of beef or whatever it was, or the lady in the flower store, and she had a limp, somebody had made a story like she had a limp and there was this and there was that and all these medical things, and the types of flowers and the colors of flowers and, the ivy hanging. And I'm like, exactly.
That's it. That's our lives. It's, and then, I know, and then when those things come through, like the name or the date or the type of clothing or whatever, then we know that it's important for that communicator,
Right.
that when we're really, if we allow that everything, like what you're talking about, the kind of flowers and the car and, when the other things come through, we know that it's totally appropriate for that communicator. I know a couple of weeks ago, I surprised myself. I was talking all about this person's clothing, which I tend not to do because it's like that, like you said, we put it in the pile of that, that's, and yet for this communicator, he was all about the clothing. So it was totally perfect,
Yeah.
that in that moment, those kind of things and the appearance came out because that was really part of that person's personality. And I think we can trust that more when we don't try to keep it into that name, rank, and serial number all the time.
Yeah. It's funny. I had a reading yesterday, and this is another thing that spirit will use your own experiences. So what I saw was, and I know this woman wasn't from the East Coast. That's all I knew. She wasn't from the East Coast. So it didn't make any sense to me, but I had to say something to her, So I saw Central Park. And if you ever gone into Central Park, if you go all the way in the back, there's this huge fountain. And in the fountain, there's an angel. And there was a movie years ago about the AIDS, and it was called Angels of America, and they shot a lot of that around that particular angel, But I used to go there once in a while, and I'd see the big angel in the fountain, blah, blah, blah. And so anyhow, as the reading was going on, I brought this up to her. I said, he keeps on bringing me to this angel in Central Park. Now, it may not have anything to do with Central Park, but I'm seeing a fountain with this big angel statue. And she said, oh, I understand. She said, because we have a statue in this one park of the angel, of an angel. It's not a fountain, but there's a big angel. And we go there for we call it his angel anniversary, which I thought was beautiful.
That's beautiful. And it was as close as your memory could get you to that
Right.
memory. That's beautiful. It's perfect.
Exactly. Yeah. So, it doesn't necessarily have to fit exactly, but they were used. I would relate to that. I would understand that. So, I had to bring that into the reading, and I made it clear to her that this is not Central Park. He's not referring to Central Park, but he's referring to that particular thing because I would know it.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's amazing because we recognize, if we're willing to recognize that stuff that's inside of us, that's where it goes, it's because we get as close as we can get in our own system and then translate it the best we can. It's perfect.
And this goes way off topic, but it's funny because years ago, one of my teachers has said, don't show them the process. Don't show them the process. And I show them the process.
Yeah, I do too. I think especially if there's a no. I know I didn't process it right for that person in that spot. Does that make sense? So if I back up and I tell them my process, all of a sudden it clicks,
Right.
on how it's happening. Especially, I might have used this example before, but it sticks in my head because I don't like Chucky, the horror guy Chucky.
Oh God, no.
I don't like him. And I kept seeing this Chucky doll during this reading. So I was saying everything around it. I was saying guy liked horror flicks, the guy, would have this, and the guy would have that. And they're like, yeah, they were like lukewarm yeses,
Right.
I finally backed up and I said, okay, let me just tell you what's going on in my head. I have a big old Chucky doll sitting in the living room and it's just staring at me. And she goes, oh, he had one in his living room that would creep everybody out. I should have just said that from the get-go, but I didn't, so I tried to make it a symbol and it was a stinking Chucky doll. You know,
Yeah.
so sometimes we have to back up, I think, and because our process might not be translating the way it really needs to. And then when we share the process of what's going on with us, then that's, you know, that's what we needed to say to begin with.
And this particular client, she was, and I didn't realize, she didn't tell me till a little later on. So I started explaining how I was getting things because she's interested in taking mediumship courses and whatnot. So she's doing psychic development and stuff like that, healing, et cetera, et cetera. So when I would get something a little strange, I would explain to her how I was getting it. She goes, oh, really? That's cool. You know, so they understand, you know, first of all, so the public understands how mediumship works, but also the student or slash sitter understands how it could work in their head or the possibilities.
Right, because everybody has their own version of communication with their own peoples. They
Right.
might not be able to sit down and bring through a communicator for somebody else, like what we're doing every day, but they have the
Right.
opportunity to recognize their own and their own connection in their own way.
Right.
And to know that everybody's very different in that there is no how to 1, 2, 3 for getting names, dates, and serial numbers or recognizing your spirit people. It's really a personalized process.
Yes, it is. Okay.
Did we, I think we, okay.
Yeah.
With that one.
You can work this out if you want. Maybe next week we'll talk about the grieving process.
I think that would be a good idea because that's been really foremost in a lot of minds lately. So yes, the grieving. So we'll write that down. You get a precursor to what we'll talk about next week. And we'll see you then.
Bye-bye.